Hey everyone, I hope you've had a great day so far and that you're doing well. For this video, I think it's probably a bit of a review slash page through of the Combat Patrol Companion for Warhammer 40,000, which has pretty much been released just with the pretty much start of the new 11th edition for Warhammer 40,000. So at the point of recording this particular video anyway, I would have done the unboxing of the actual Armageddon box set. It was a lengthy video, but it was fun and enjoyable to do, and I can safely say I've actually started clipping through some of the actual contents, namely the Marine side. But with that being said, the Orc Dakar rig, actually really cool. I've seen it on tabletop. It's actually a pretty cool unit. Anyway, that's besides the point. So going back to the intent of the video, the Combat Patrol Companion book, as I said, it will be a bit of a page through and a semi-review, just because, one, I don't want to spend the entire video going through every single page, probably because that will get me into some weird type of trouble, but yeah, I haven't actually had a chance to read through it from start to front, so this is a bit of a fresh, live page through as well. But yeah, the intent is just to go through the actual Combat Patrol and just give an indication of what is actually in this book. So, front of the actual book itself, the Combat Patrol Companion with some nice artwork there. So we've got an Orc here at the very top, and then Marines versus Orcs down here at the bottom. Of course, it's the Ultramarine colours. Of course it is. On the back, so we do have some more, I was going to say artwork, some really artwork, more of the photography of the Marines and the Orcs, which is pretty much on par with the actual Armageddon box set and probably the future starter boxes for both. In terms of the blurb, I will go through that. So here we have the Welcome to the Combat Patrol Companion. The Combat Patrol Companion will introduce you to the Warhammer 40,000 hobby, providing you with inspiration and guidance as you collect stunning miniatures, build and paint them, and then play games with them against your friends. If you have just purchased your first Combat Patrol or are considering doing so, then in this book you will find. So it'll be obviously the aspects of Warhammer 40,000, as well as a little brief overview of the actual Combat Patrols that are available. Caveat, it's pretty much what was released around the 10th edition. A lot of these Combat Patrols will naturally evolve and change as we move into the 11th. So there'll be some lore, various illustrations and art, and things like that. So right off the bat, and I made a comment of it in the Armageddon box set, I think this book, which is, do I actually get to see how many pages it is? Around 180, give or take. I feel this 180 pages is pretty much the forward section of the core rulebook, or what would traditionally be the first section of the core rulebook. If you look at the Armageddon video that I've done, the core rulebook is basically like an A5 little booklet, which is like yay thick. So Games Workshop have taken an alternative approach with some of the literary side of things. So this is very much, pretty much, a lot of the background supporting stuff and not so much the rules. Anyway, let's get straight into it. So we have a nice little introductory blurb there with a image of the actual Emperor on the Golden Throne. And of course we have a contents page, so there'll be a start on what is Combat Patrol, going through the elements of the hobby, collecting, build, painting and playing, playing Combat Patrol, a Galaxy of War, so a lot of that will probably start introducing the lore and story side of 40k. And then the factions, which I can probably bet you right now are aligned to who has a Combat Patrol. So, basic introduction, I'm not going to go through too much of that. Going through what is a Combat Patrol, so we'll naturally have a lot of these splash pages of the tabletop in-store looks and things like that. A breakdown of the actual hobby itself, the collecting, the building, the painting and the playing. Now I've also been doing Imperium and Combat Patrol page throughs as well, and I'm pretty sure most of these symbols are the same symbols used in that. How to collect things, building, painting, and playing. So that's basically, the first few odds and ends. There was naturally a page regarding the digital support Natural 40k app, which is being progressively, I don't want to say rebuilt, updated for 11th edition. Some of the basic gaming principles, which I won't spend too much time going through. I feel like this image has actually popped up before, because I think that's also the pre-painted terrain that is featured there. So obviously going through missions, how to prepare for battle, playing the game, and afterwards. Battle report. So it looks like there's going to be some images of the Blood Angels and Orcs. So here's actual bit of a run through of a typical play. So Orcs versus Blood Angels. So just going through that particular mechanics, what all the units are doing, things like that, capturing objectives and things. So obviously very nice to see that. So it looks like they're going to be combat patrol sized armies, and then how to eventually expand your armies into 1,000 points, 1,500, 2,000, 3,000, etc. So obviously it goes through some of that. I love some of the artwork and the actual photo shoots here. In fact, speaking of photo shoots, I mean, this one is a very nice shot of a large array of the Adeptor sororities. So the Sisters of Battle and a lot of the supporting units here and there. That does look very, very cool. I've got a shot here of the World Eaters. And then going through some of that. Galaxy War. So this will start going into the actual lore side of things. So we'll just quickly page through this. I'm not going to go spending too much time here. Various war zones that are referenced within the game setting. Here we have an actual galaxy map. I don't know if it's the full galaxy map. Quite possibly could be. I mean, you've got Imperium Nihilus. This should be the Eastern Fringe. And in fact, you've got the Ultramar region down here. There's Terra and Mars, Cadian Gate, Eye of Terror, and things like that. So it's a decently sized map. So it's always nice to see that. Some more very nice artwork here. So we're just going through the various factions. The Adeptus Astartes. Now naturally you'll obviously go through each of the first founding legions, which are obviously now chapters: Ultramarines, Imperial Fist, Raven Guard, Salamanders, White Scars, Blood Angels, Iron Hands, Dark Angels, and Space Wolves. Some nice images here of various chapters, some first founding, some are second founding and onwards, Codex Astartes and things like that. Space Marine information, typical Space Marine units and things like that. Blood Angels. So that's pretty much the Sanguinary Spearhead, aka that is the actual Blood Angels. What does it call it? Combat Patrol. Having weird mental lapse there. The Dark Angels, so there's this nice page there, and the actual Dark Angels Combat Patrol. And then how to obviously expand into that. Space Wolves and Space Wolves Combat Patrol. Now this is interesting going through this, because I did start a series of going through each of the Combat Patrol boxes, which I'm still trying to settle on an actual format. But obviously there are a lot of these Combat Patrols I'll be going through over time. Black Templars. I've just realised, I think this is the first time I've seen this artwork, and his face looks really funny. That still does look cool though. The actual Black Templars Combat Patrol. So it's actually quite nice that this particular book goes through what the actual combat patrols would look like if you were to either get a chance to read this book or page through this book or whatever, and get this book before you even picked an army. Adeptus Custodes, good old Custodes, the Adeptor Sororitas, and that particular combat patrol. Mechanicus. The Astra Militarum, aka the Imperial Guard. Actually, I didn't realise that was their actual combat patrol. What do we have? Imperial Agents. I think that they don't really... No, I take that back. I was going to say they don't have a combat patrol. They do have a combat patrol. I take that back. that is me being silly. I've not really seen it, so that's actually why I've paid no attention to it. So yeah, it's always nice to see what other combat patrols look like, even though I've not had any real gravitational pull to Imperial agents. Once again, some nice photography of different armies and scenes. So we've got the Guard and Tyranids, Forces of Chaos. So we have the 9 Traitor Legions: Black Legion, Word Bearers, Night Lords, Alpha Legion, Iron Warriors, World Eaters, Death Guard, Emperor's Children, and Thousand Sons. And I like how everything is pretty much homeworld destroyed. Not going to cover as to why. That's probably an entirely different subject altogether. So just going through those, the Chaos Gods, so the 4 Chaos God Pantheon, so it's always nice to see a quick reference to that. So we obviously have Khorne, Tzeentch, Nurgle, and Slaanesh. Chaos Space Marines, going through that combat patrol. World Eaters, I do actually like how the book has just like a little page or two of little background fluff information. Nothing too heavy, but it's obviously a nice little introduction to that particular faction. There's the World Eaters Combat Patrol, Thousand Sons and Tzeentch, and that particular combat patrol, which actually isn't too bad. I've always been a little bit dubious about the Zangors, that's me, and I'm not sure what to feel about the Demon Prince. The Death Guard, it's interesting that they've gone through a different take of how to do some of that information. And the Death Guard Combat Patrol, Emperor's Children, obviously my Chaos faction of choice, and there is the Emperor's Children Combat Patrol, which I think is still really cool and thematic, but I'm very biased. I will admit I love this particular image. We've got the Emperor's Children against the Astra Militarum, with Fulgrim here as well. So we've also got a lot of the Slaanesh demons as well, so it's a really nice image of the Emperor's Children engaging in a nice battle. I quite like that. The Xenos threat, so we've gone through the Loyalist Space Marines, the Chaos Space Marines, and naturally you would have to go through the various Xenos races. So we've got the Orcs and the actual Orc Combat Patrol. And this is actually probably the first time I've actually seen some of these combat patrols like properly, because once again, as I mentioned earlier, there are a lot of combat patrols and armies that I just don't gravitate towards, so I've not really had a chance to see some of their actual combat patrol contents. Tyranids, the Necrons and their combat patrol, the Eldari, who actually have a decent amount of fluff here, and the Eldari Combat Patrol, the Drukari, the former Dark Eldar, the various Cabals, and that Combat Patrol. Which is interesting that this Combat Patrol is actually listed, because I remember when this one came out and replaced the previous Drukari Combat Patrol, which was really weird, because I still think this is a very niche Combat Patrol. Some people were suggesting that this was supposed to be a limited edition Combat Patrol, because it came out at the same time when a lot of those limited edition Space Marine ones came out, the Imperial Fist, White Scars, Raven Guard, etc. But the fact that this is present in the book would probably suggest that no, this actually is supposed to be the ongoing Combat Patrol for the Drukari up until its replacement in 11th edition. As I said, it's very niche, but I did like how you've got the Kronos and the Talos there in there. But that's it. And I think lastly will be the Tau Empire and their Combat Patrol. Who would get that? I do not know. In saying that, I'd have picked up some Tau stuff, but there's a reason. Oh, I completely forgot about the Leagues of Votann. My bad. And obviously the Votann Combat Patrol. And I think that's it. Nope, Genestealer Cults. Goes to show how many factions there now are that I'm still not used to seeing exist, because when I did 2nd edition, 3rd edition, Genestealer Cults are very much, they weren't an actual faction on their own. Same with Leagues of Votann. Your squats are basically referenced in story, and you had the odd thing here and there, but not an actual faction. So that's the Combat Patrol for the Gene Stealer Cults, and then just some nice photography of some armies here. So it's the Eldari and Chaos, and then the end of the book. And I like how I said I was going to do a quick page, which actually, looking at the time, has been a relatively quick page through. So that was actually a nice little page through of the actual Combat Patrol Companion. What do I think of this particular book? It's definitely not a mandatory requirement. Like if you're not brand new to 40k, there's probably nothing in this book you did not know. It's purely, you know, complementary to some of the other stuff that's come out, e.g. obviously the core rules. So it's a nice little book to be able to page through at your own leisure, but it's definitely not necessarily adding to or enhancing the game, the value and all that. So I still have no regrets picking this up. I mean, once again, there's some nice information in there, and even for myself in 40k, part of the game itself has always been still a case of appreciating the story, the lore, obviously the completed models, etc., for, you know, the painting that's gone into it to, you know, make the actual armies, etc. So overall, I like it. I mean, there's still a lot of nice stuff in here to look through, and as I've mentioned, it's probably the first time I've actually seen some of the Combat Patrols with a bit more, I don't want to say focus per se, but just that nice little, oh, I actually didn't know what was in your Combat Patrol, and things like that. So definitely it's very much a complementary and somewhat supplementary book, but it's definitely not core reading or mandatory that you must get it. As an introductory item, especially if you're brand new and starting in 11th edition, it's not too bad to add to the collection, because I'd imagine at some point in time this will go out of print, and then never to be seen again. And obviously, because all the Combat Patrols are effectively based on the current 10th edition boxes, once all the starter sets, etc., roll out for the 11th edition, so within 3 years, you know, this book effectively becomes, I don't want to say null and void per se, but obviously the Combat Patrols here will start becoming redundant because they would have ultimately been replaced. So it's obviously a bit of a point in time thing. So definitely a case of, if you want just a little bit of extra fluff story stuff in your collection, it's not a bad thing to add. Although if you've been playing for a few years and a few editions, once again, that's not really anything new from what I can see, because I obviously haven't read, you know, every single 180 pages. There could be some new stuff in there that will be an interesting read through, but I suspect probably not. The Operation Imperator book that comes in the actual box set, however, I think that actually will have some new lore and story aspects that hasn't yet been published into the setting. So overall, if you want it, definitely grab it. I mean, it's going to keep you amused for a little bit when you do some background reading. But yes, despite it coming out alongside all the other stuff for the start of the 11th edition, I definitely would not say you must go out, find it on the shelf and grab it there and then. But once again, it's up to you. I think overall it's still a nice little book to have, and as I said, I don't regret picking it up. I think there's still some nice things to look through there. But it's definitely not a critical, I must have this book, because it's going to add another level of excitement to the actual gameplay and all that stuff. Anyway, I'm actually going to leave the video there. I think I've probably waffled on enough for the time being for a 180-page book that I was somewhat paging through. I'm glad I have it, and I'm definitely going to spend a bit more time and, you know, page through it a bit more, especially the pages that are more relevant to myself. But yes, it's definitely nice to have, and yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to see if this is going to be the new approach from Games Workshop in the way of keeping the core rulebook relatively slimmed down by separating core rules, which are obviously critical if you want to play the game, and keeping stuff like this outside of it and more complementary to the game. So for those who want it, they can grab it. For those that don't want it, they can leave it. It's not going to impact them how to paint the models. It's not going to impact how they play the game, things like that. That's the vibe I'm getting anyway. Thank you very much for sticking around for this bit of a review and page through of the Combat Patrol Companion. Feel free to leave a like, comment, subscribe if you enjoyed the content. All of this does help support the channel and I do appreciate it. Extra content is also on the Instagram as well as the YouTube community tab. It's basically a lot of work in progress stuff of what I'm actively working on. I do suspect there will be a bit of a surge in some of the 40k stuff in the upcoming weeks, obviously with the release of 11th edition. And I've mentioned it a few times, feel free to check out the Armageddon box set unboxing that I've done, but I'm also trying to do some shorts on some of the contents just to make it a little bit more digestible. With that being said, stay safe and take care, and I will catch you all in a future video, whether it's something Warhammer related or just something else on the channel. See ya.